Well, hello there and good day. Thank you so much for joining me. My name is Jesse Pohlman. I'm a sci-fi fantasy author currently hailing from Long Island, New York, and welcome to Ariel's Writing Corner, where I take questions I get from friends and strangers and answer them. If you've got a writing question or thought you'd like me to give you some feedback on, please feel free to leave it in the comments below. Or reach out to me on Blue Sky, link in the description down below. Also, just a heads up, this video is not quite sponsored by my upcoming book, Lockhardt's Rebellion, launching sometime in early spring. Stay tuned to the channel by subscribing for more details. It's a fun bit of a noble bright romp with a distinctly queer identity. With that said, let's just dive straight into this right here. I always mix up my hands. David from the Comic Chameleons asks, how can I add a tragic death to a character's backstory without being too cliched and or melodramatic? Allow me to note, we'll be talking about the nature of death, centered around some personal examples from my life. So please, if medical ailments like cancer are a triggering factor for you, this may not be the video for you. We're going to talk about cancer, we're going to talk about death, we're going to talk about family elements, that sort of thing. With that said, let's get into it. Character deaths, for me, there are three main things, but they're kind of like a 1, 2A, 2B, and 3. They need to feel real, or at least realistic, first and foremost. It needs to feel like something that could really happen to a person. Unless you're living in like a fantasy world where a guy is slain with a magic fireball, in which case there's a parallel to that, but magic fireball, death in combat, real thing that happens, right? The death needs to connect, secondly, to character themes, and secondly, to character motivations. Because motivations and themes are parallel tracks, but they're not the same thing. And third, they need to be detailed enough to provide both all of the above, but without going too in-depth and becoming too much about the past story, which I'm going to try to avoid in this video, but I don't know if I'm going to. Because here's the thing, right? The best way for me to answer this question is for me to provide a few examples of how death has changed my life, as well as the lives of my loved ones. After all, backstory deaths need to feel real. So we're going to talk about some real deaths that I've experienced in my family and some threads that go throughout them and some other such things. So first up was my mom. She was a heavy, and I do mean heavy smoker, to the point that I was mentally practicing how to react when she would inevitably contract cancer in my high school years. I would sit and talk to myself, talking myself through how I would explain to others that she got sick. That was my way of coping. She was eventually diagnosed with small cell lung cancer around March of 2006. I was 21 years old. My parents tried to keep me busy with my day-to-day life so I wouldn't be as exposed to what she went through. She suffered a brief but extremely painful illness and passed at the end of August on the 29th of 2006. If I have my dates right, I do mix them up. 6 and 9 mix up in my head sometimes. I can't help that. She tried chemo, but it was mostly ineffective. The state-of-the-art on medicine is way better today than it was back then. The cancer spread quickly, but it notably spread to her bones, meaning it was extra pain medicine resistant, and she was extremely incapacitated for the last few months of her life. It had a profound impact on me and what would be my character motivations if I were a character in fiction, because it spurred me to spend extra time getting an extra degree in English instead of just jumping into teaching social studies. I got my bachelor's in 2006. She lived to see me get my bachelor's. She lived to see me put my first book out. But she died before I did my graduate year in my 5-year teaching program. So I got my master's in 2007. I spent 2 extra years getting an extra degree. It's supposed to be 1.5 years. It became 2 because of paperwork. Whatever, it's fine. I gave you the details, but it was a fairly simple case, given all the things that could be simple in cancer. So it had a fairly simple outcome. There were ups and downs, good days, bad days, hiccups along the way, but I'm not miring you down in every detail because most of that isn't important to understand the situation. It's detailed enough without overage, as I said earlier. And as for feeling real, this cancer is common. This cancer is so common, in fact, that my wife's father got the same kind of cancer for pretty much the same reason: smoking. He was diagnosed on October 4th, 2006, which is coincidentally my father's birthday, and he passed on May 22nd, 2007. Her dad and my mom had similar lengths of illness, my mom being sick from February to August, so 6 months, and her dad from October to May, 7 months. Their diseases took a different track, but the outcomes were the same. He passed 10 minutes to the hour. Two similar stories happening to two different people who didn't even know each other at the time. She and I wouldn't meet until 2012, and as we were getting to know one another as just friends, we discovered we had this connection. When we both became single, thanks to my girlfriend dumping me for her boyfriend and vice versa, it was a point of bonding. And if we were characters in a romance novel, which I think this world is a bit too cruel for that to be the truth of, each of us having that in our backstory would be a major factor in our getting together. Then there's my dad. My dad also died of cancer, but he had it in what I can only describe as a really cruel twist of fate. The story is a little less straightforward. It's a little less on the believable side because it's on the stranger side of real, and it serves as a critical series of backstory events for both my wife and I today, since it set the stage for the nature of our lives since then. I'll tell the story, but don't worry, we're coming back to our key definitions. He had hepatitis C, which he got during his hippie days. Don't share needles, wear rubber, all that advice, it would have saved his life. Around the time Hurricane Sandy hit us in 2012, my dad started having stomach aches and growing larger in his stomach. It turned out his liver was starting to fail from the hep C, combined with the fact that while he wasn't your stereotypical alcoholic, he did like to drink. Port wine, very fun. You might notice I'm not a drinker. Well, he did quit drinking. He tried various medication treatments, had some hospitalizations, and eventually his liver was turning purely cirrhotic. Cirrhotic livers are dying, and as a result of their cellular morphology, I think, I'm not a doctor, I think that's how this works, those liver cells can transform into cancerous ones. And they did. The good news here, for now, was that this was 2015. He had a very specific, very targeted chemotherapy treatment, was added to the transplant list, and eventually was lucky enough to receive a transplant. Thank you to the donor. We don't know who you are, but we thank you. Transplants are, generally speaking, a cure for liver cancer, since the cancerous liver isn't, there anymore. He got an MRI every 6 months for a couple of years, then every year for a couple more. 5 years after the transplant, he got what was going to be his final MRI. We discovered to our horror that he had cancer in his lymph nodes, but not, notably, in his donor liver. It turned out that the cancer had hidden from detection for 4 years and finally become metastatic in that 5th year. That was in 2020, just as the hospitals were shutting down and getting ready to brace for COVID's impact. We spent until December 3rd, 2021 taking care of him while dodging the modern-day plague. It was a rough time, and we watched him go from feeling fine to feeling bad to passing away. And incidentally enough, he passed, we think, 10 minutes before the hour, same as my father-in-law. It was a rough time, but we watched him go, and in his darkest days, he became maybe the most polite and generous self he'd ever been. And some of the resolutions we reached to lingering problems in our lives made his death feel a little less painful. Back to this little stuff, this prompt. My 3 criteria, or my 3.5 criteria, were that character deaths for backstory need to feel real, need to connect with themes and motivations, and need to be detailed enough without providing too much detail. And it's here where I'll throw you a late game curveball and remind you that cliché and melodrama are two very different beasts. Clichés are overused literary gimmicks, while melodrama is more like a drama laid on so thick it's hard to believe. If someone were writing my life and they just said cancer over and over again, we haven't even talked about my grandparents, most of whom also died from or at least had cancer at some point, they might get feedback from critique partners saying, hey man, isn't there something other than cancer in the world? It's kind of one note to point out that it's not realistic. It's hard to believe. It's just kind of cliche. And with the cliche comes the melodrama. This poor bastard's life has been nothing but cancer killing his family. How tragic. Sounds melodramatic at first. But cliches and melodrama are two different things. Sure, smoker with lung cancer is a cliche, but it's a cliche for a reason. People like their drugs, and they smoke, and it destroys their lungs as the price for the buzz. The cliche is very real. It's the same with any other drugs, and I'm not pretending I'm innocent of drug use. I also won't pretend that my dad going from sick and dying to cured and then back to sick and dying after all during global medical crisis, didn't have a dramatic nature to it. But whether it's cancer, dementia, chronic kidney failure, or any other condition, chronic illnesses are a nightmare to manage, and the day in, day out of it can be considered dramatic to some extent. But deaths and backstories exist to create drama. They just have to connect to character themes and character motivations. And if you want to know how this backstory has influenced and motivated me, I've had 2 situations where I've had weird presenting bits of flesh cut out of me, only to find that they were precancerous. My experience with my parents' cancer has left me extremely wary of developing it. Cancer is a theme in my life. And future Jesse has probably already been saved a significant threat to his life that would have developed 5 years or so from now had I not gotten investigated. If you're approaching your 40s, take a hint from my fuck cancer character backstory, I'm sorry, and schedule a colonoscopy. I know that this was a long and difficult story, but if you found it helpful in some way, please share this video with a friend so they can learn something too. Because it's not just about character backstory. This is where I totally freelance and make stuff up off the top of my head. Your characters are supposed to feel real. Sometimes cliches pop up in people's lives. Sometimes chronic illness, especially long-term illness, it's melodramatic. It can be really tough. It can be really loaded. It's all about how you take that information and you present it. I hope I was able to convey what I went through without conveying so much of what I went through that it was overwhelming, if that makes any sense. I want to give a special shout out to my wife for helping me with remembering some things, and I didn't explicitly ask her, is it okay to do this? I said I want to do this, and she was like, here's some information on that. So I take that as her letting me do this too, because I wouldn't share this story if we hadn't talked about it first. It's a personal story, but thank you, love. I really do appreciate it, and I appreciate this journey that we're on together as we start a whole new life. Yeah, it's gonna be weird the next few months. Anyway, thank you all so much for joining me, and as always on this channel, pieces.